Hello and welcome to the fifth episode of the Actual News podcast. In today's session, we discuss potential government shutdown, Biden administration canceling $4.28 billion in student debt, additional aid for Ukraine, and Trudeau shuffling cabinet, plus more national and global news. Let's go. First, let's get into some quick news. A Georgia appeals court ruled to disqualify Fani Willis from prosecuting the election interference case against Trump due to her romantic relationship with Nathan Wade, the lawyer she hired for the case. Trump transferred his shares in his social media company, Trump Media, to a trust managed by his son, Donald Trump Jr. U.S. authorities arrested a Chinese man accused of being involved in an attempt to influence local politics in California. Former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo intends to file a defamation lawsuit against a woman who accused him of sexual harassment during his time in office. Trump is threatening Europe with tariffs unless it increases purchases of U.S. oil and gas, leaving European leaders uncertain on how to avoid a trade conflict. Federal prosecutors charged Luigi Mangione with murder in the death of United Healthcare CEO, with a potential death sentence if convicted. Starbucks baristas in Los Angeles, Chicago, and Seattle have announced a strike for today. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum announced that Mexico is prepared to receive its citizens deported from the United States, but will not accept deportees of other nationalities. An Egyptian national studying in Virginia was arrested by the FBI this week on charges of plotting a mass casualty attack against the Israeli consulate in Midtown Manhattan. A car drove at full speed into Christmas market in the eastern German city of Magdeburg, resulting in at least 11 fatalities and more than 60 injuries. Authorities are investigating the incident as a potential terrorist attack. President Joe Biden will travel to Rome from January 9th to 12th, where he will meet with Pope Francis and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. The visit, taking place just before the end of the presidency, follows a recent phone call between Biden and the Pope to discuss global peace efforts. Now, in other news, the Biden administration announced on Friday the cancellation of $4.28 billion in student debt for nearly 55,000 public service workers, bringing the total student debt forgiveness for public service employees to approximately $78 billion for nearly 1.1 million workers. This is a part of President Joe Biden's broader effort to fulfill his 2020 campaign promise of providing debt relief to millions of Americans, with nearly 5 million individuals now approved for student debt relief under his administration. In other news, the Biden administration will soon announce its final Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative package, utilizing the remaining funds allocated for new weapons for Ukraine. The package, valued at approximately $1.2 billion, is expected to include air defense interceptors and artillery munitions, though the exact details will be revealed in the upcoming announcement. Well, the U.S. federal government is set to partially shut down at 12:01 a.m. Eastern on Saturday if a spending bill is not passed by Congress and signed by President Biden today. What was expected to be a smooth process has been complicated by President-elect Trump and Tesla CEO Elon Musk, who has wielded significant influence over the Republican Party. In short, House members, including 38 Republicans, rejected a spending plan endorsed by Donald Trump. The government will shut down at midnight if lawmakers cannot reach the deal. At Trump's request, the plan included a 2-year suspension of the debt ceiling, with some conservative members arguing this could lead to excessive government spending. Speaker Mike Johnson's spending deal was undercut by Trump and Musk, sparkling renewed discussions of potentially ousting Johnson. By the way, there's also discussion that perhaps Johnson should be replaced by Musk or Ramaswamy, which is just completely insane. Well, the situation began on Tuesday when GOP House Speaker Johnson unveiled a bipartisan spending plan to fund the government through March 14th. But it included provisions unrelated to government funding, which angered right-wing Republicans and Musk. On Wednesday, Musk used his social media platform to criticize the bill, amplifying opposition. Trump escalated the situation by announcing his opposition to the bill on Wednesday evening. Trump then shifted his position on Thursday, demanding a bill that would either raise or eliminate the U.S. debt ceiling, an unprecedented demand from a GOP leader. This led to the introduction of a revised bill championed by Musk and Trump, which aimed to avoid a shutdown, suspend the debt ceiling for 2 years, and include $110 billion in disaster aid. However, the bill failed to pass the House due to opposition from Republicans on the debt ceiling measure and near universal Democratic rejection, accusing the GOP of bowing to Musk's influence. If the shutdown occurs, federal employees would be furloughed. But essential workers like TSA and air traffic controllers would remain on duty without pay until the government is funded. In addition, U.S. troops, including those deployed to combat zones, would miss their next paycheck. White House Speaker Karine Jean-Pierre on the potential government shutdown, quote, "This is the mess that Speaker Johnson has created, and that's what he needs to fix by holding himself accountable to the bipartisan deal. This is what Republicans have to own after jamming their deal in the 11th hour," unquote. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration on Friday proposed a new framework to expedite reviews of exemptions for automakers seeking to deploy self-driving vehicles without traditional human controls, such as steering wheels and brake pedals. Currently, NHTSA can authorize up to 2,500 such vehicles per manufacturer, but years-long delays in reviewing petitions have frustrated automakers. Under existing laws, fully autonomous vehicles with required human controls can operate without explicit NHTSA approval. However, the industry leaders are emphasizing the need for clarity to maintain U.S. competitiveness in the global market. Automakers, including General Motors, Ford, Tesla, have faced hurdles in gaining approval for autonomous vehicles deployment. GM, for instance, withdrew petitions in both 2020 and 2023 after delays in the review process, and recently announced its exit from the Cruise robotaxi business. Similarly, Ford withdrew its 2021 petition following the closure of its self-driving venture Argo AI in 2022. The Alliance for Automotive Innovation, representing automakers such as GM, Toyota, Volkswagen, Hyundai, and others, welcomed NHTSA's proposal. The group called for urgent action to establish a regulatory framework, warning that delays could jeopardize U.S. leadership in autonomous technology. Now, the EPA Administrator Michael Regan announced he will step down on December 31st after leading efforts under President Biden to combat climate change, reduce emissions, and promote clean energy. Regan's tenure included approving California's clean car rules and finalizing EPA regulators to cut vehicles' emissions by 49% by 2032. However, his departure comes as Donald Trump prepares to reverse Biden's climate policies, including scrapping methane fees, reciting vehicle pollution rules, and eliminating EV incentives. Trump also plans to reinstate California's loss of authority to set its own emissions standards. Now, let's explore what's happening across the pond. Britain has appointed Labour Party heavyweight Peter Mandelson as its new ambassador to the United States, marking a significant shift in its diplomatic strategy. Mandelson, a former European Commissioner for Trade and pivotal figure in Labour success under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, will take up the post in January, replacing career diplomat Karen Pierce, who is concluding her term. This appointment, made by Prime Minister Starmer, comes at a crucial time as the UK navigates its relationship with the US under the return of Donald Trump to power. Mandelson, known for his political acumen and behind-the-scenes maneuvering, is tasked with maintaining strong bilateral ties, particularly around key issues like Ukraine's defense against Russian aggression and avoiding potential trade tariffs from the Trump administration. Mandelson's role will require careful diplomacy, given his past controversies, including being fired from 2 ministerial positions over scandals. His stance on Brexit and his previously expressed support for closer ties with China may also put him at odds with Trump's political priorities. Nevertheless, his appointment underscores Starmer's commitment to strengthening the UK's global position while navigating the complexities of a changing political landscape in the US. The decision to send a high-profile politician rather than a career diplomat reflects Starmer's determination to engage more directly with the US government, particularly as Trump resumes office. Now, let's talk about Canada. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau introduced a significant cabinet reshuffle on Friday, adding 8 Liberal MPs to ministerial roles and reassigning 4 others in a bid to stabilize his government following a challenging week. The changes come as just 1 month before U.S. President-elect Donald Trump takes office, with growing questions about Trudeau's political future and the viability of his minority government. The ceremony was overshadowed by a major blow. NDP leader Singh announced his party's intention to introduce a motion of non-confidence in the new year, jeopardizing the Liberals' hold on power. The reshuffle maintains gender parity, with 19 men and 19 women in the cabinet, excluding the prime minister, and aims to balance regional representation. Trudeau's reshuffle follows Chrystia Freeland's unexpected resignation earlier this week, triggering speculation about the prime minister's political future. Despite calls for unity from ministers like Anand and Petipas Taylor, Trudeau's leadership remains under scrutiny. Politics is about choices, said Bendayan, acknowledging the difficult decisions ahead. Trudeau did not take questions after the shuffle, but emphasized in a statement that his government remains focused on affordability, job creation, and economic growth. With opposition parties gearing up for a potential confidence vote and the Liberal Party facing internal challenges, Trudeau's ability to navigate the coming month will be crucial to his government's survival. Now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has initiated discussions with European leaders about deploying peacekeeping troops in Ukraine as part of a potential ceasefire agreement. While the concept is still in its early stages, it has garnered interest from some European leaders and U.S. President-elect Trump. Zelensky emphasized that Ukraine's long-term security depends on membership in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, stating it is the only way to guarantee against the future Russian aggression. Meanwhile, Russian President Putin signaled openness to talk with Trump aimed at resolving the conflict. These developments suggest new avenues for diplomatic engagement, but underline the complexity of securing a lasting peace in Ukraine. On December 16, 2024, special envoys and representatives from countries including Canada, the EU, the US, and others convened in Geneva to discuss Afghanistan's escalating crisis. They expressed grave concern over the Taliban's December ban on women and girls attending medical training, stressing the severe consequences for healthcare and society. The group condemned ongoing terrorist attacks and the presence of terrorist groups within Afghanistan, emphasizing the need for comprehensive action against terrorism. The envoys called for an inclusive national dialogue to establish a constitutional order and representative government. They urged the implementation of UN Security Council resolutions and acknowledged the UN's efforts in Afghanistan. They reinforced the importance of international NGOs and humanitarian efforts, focusing on vulnerable groups, and committed to deepening regional cooperation, especially in countering terrorism and migration. The meeting was hosted by Switzerland, with plans for future discussions. In a landmark development, U.S. diplomats are visiting Syria for the first time since the United States closed its embassy in Damascus in 2012. The delegation includes the top State Department official for the Middle East and a hostage envoy. They are holding discussions with representatives of the rebel group HTS, as well as activists, civil society members, and minority groups. The talks aim to address Syria's political transition and the ongoing efforts to locate and recover missing Americans Americans, including journalist Austin Tice, who disappeared under the Bashar al-Assad regime. The visit underscores renewed U.S. engagement in Syria at a critical juncture. Among the key issues being addressed is the future of U.S. troops stationed in the region. The Defense Department recently updated the number of U.S. personnel in Syria to approximately 2,000, significantly higher than the previously cited figure of 900. These troops were originally deployed to enhance operations against the self-declared Islamic State before Assad's ouster. Their continued presence and role remain uncertain as discussions about Syria's political future progress. Meanwhile, the United States has ramped up the strikes against ISIS targets in Syria, reflecting concerns about the group's potential resurgence amid the country's ongoing instability. At a recent meeting in Jordan, the United States and several other governments emphasized the importance of preventing terrorism from regaining a foothold in Syria. This diplomatic mission marks a significant step in U.S. efforts to re-engage with the complexities of Syria's political and security landscape. And now to the strikes directly. U.S. Central Command forces conducted a precision airstrike targeting ISIS leader Abu Yusuf Aka Mahmoud in the Deir az-Savr province, Syria, resulting in 2 ISIS operatives killed, including Abu Yusuf himself. This airstrike is part of CENTCOM's ongoing commitment, along with partners in the region, to disrupt and degrade efforts by terrorists to plan, organize, and conduct attacks against civilians and military personnel from the U.S., our allies, and our partners throughout the region and beyond. Well, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan stated that foreign countries will likely cease supporting Kurdish fighters in Syria following the toppling of Bashar al-Assad. Erdogan emphasized that the Kurdish YPG, which has been backed by the U.S., is an extension of the PKK, a group deemed a terrorist organization by Turkey, the U.S., and the EU. Erdogan compared the YPG to the Islamic State and predicted that external powers will no longer collaborate with such terrorist organizations. Despite the U.S. having 900 troops working with the YPG-led Syrian Democratic Forces, well, updated, it's about 2,000, Turkey has carried out several cross-border offensives against the group, pushing for the U.S. to end its support. Tensions have risen since Assad's fall, and although SDF commander Mazloum Abdi acknowledged foreign fighters' involvement, he suggested they would depart if a truce is agreed with Turkey. Now, I wanted to remind you that the Kurdish forces actually are there to make sure that the 10,000 ISIS fighters are still kept in detention. So it's very important to support Kurdish personnel there. Now, the White House has reportedly provided the rebel group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the HTS, with a list of former officials who may have information about the whereabouts of American journalist Austin Tice. Unnamed sources told the New York Times. Tice was abducted in Damascus in 2012 and has remained missing ever since. Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze announced on Friday that 5 Interior Ministry officials sanctioned by the US and UK for their involvement in a violent crackdown on pro-EU protesters will be awarded one of the country's highest honors. Of course, the talk is about Georgia, the country. The officials include Interior Minister, who was also promoted to Deputy Prime Minister. The crackdown came after Georgian government halted talks on joining the European Union until 2028, triggering daily protests. The government's actions, including using water cannons and tear gas against protesters, have drawn accusations of authoritarianism and pro-Russian tendencies. Kobakidze defended the officials' actions, calling them honorable, and promised to compensate any affected by the sanctions. Elon Musk, the world's richest person and a key figure in President-elect Donald Trump's administration, publicly endorsed Germany's far-right Alternative for Germany party, calling it the savior of the country ahead of Germany's upcoming election. The AfD is gaining significant support in opinion polls and could disrupt the formation of a majority government. Musk's post, made on his social media platform X, praised the party's stance on anti-immigration policies, aligning with his previous support for similar movements in Europe. The German government acknowledged Musk's post but chose not to comment further. Musk has also voiced support for other anti-immigration figures and parties, including Italy's right-wing policies. The European Union is ready to engage in discussions to further strengthen its economic relationship with the U.S. President-elect Trump, focusing on mutual interests in the energy sector. An EU spokesperson confirmed that the bloc is committed to reducing its reliance on energy imports from Russia and diversifying its supply sources. Trump's administration has warned that the EU could face tariffs unless it addresses its growing trade deficit with the United States, particularly by increasing oil and gas transactions with the U.S., the world's largest economy. Australia has announced a $118 million deal to bolster police training in the Solomon Islands. The funds will support the recruitment of additional police officers and the construction of a new training center in the capital, Honiara. The Solomon Islands already maintains a bilateral policing agreement with China, adding complexity to Australia's engagement in the region. Yet this agreement does not grant Australia veto power over the Solomon Islands security decisions. This investment reflects Australia's continued effort to strengthen regional partnerships and enhance stability in the Pacific and increasing geopolitical competition. The UAE has assured the United States that it is not supplying weapons to Sudanese rebel forces, according to a letter from the White House official to lawmakers, as seen by Reuters. The statement comes amidst congressional efforts to halt U.S. arms sales to UAE over concerns about its involvement in Sudan's ongoing civil war. The White House has pledged to conduct its own assessment of the UAE's guarantees and will report its findings by January 17th. This review underscores the administration's cautious approach to ensuring compliance with international norms while balancing strategic relationships in the region. And that's all I have for you for today. Please stay tuned for the immediate updates across social media. Please follow at Onest Press, ONESTPRESS, for the latest updates on the potential government shutdown and other news. If needed, I will record another episode throughout this weekend, but usually we're meeting Monday through Friday, so I will be seeing you on Monday afternoon for the next 6th episode of the Actual News podcast. Please also read your newsletter, which will be coming very soon. And please join me for the AM Actual News on YouTube. The freshest episode is linked to the description of this episode. This premiered this Friday, and then next one will be following on Monday morning. Thank you so much for listening. Have a peaceful weekend, and I'll see you back on another episode of the Actual News podcast.